when fame is the ultimate motive. We live in a world where attention is the ultimate currency. They called themselves digital royalty, masters of a perfectly curated life, a nonstop broadcast of sunshine, success, and synthetic flawlessness. Their job was to sell us a beautiful lie. Their power came from your time, and their success was measured in millions of followers. But what happens when the validation runs out? What happens when the filters fail? We spent months dissecting the digital collapse of 10 individuals who couldn't handle the silence. We are exposing the great deceit, the colossal pathological chasm between the public persona and the private, violent reality. Consider Ali Abulaban, the TikTok comic known as JinnKid, whose devoted family man act shattered under the weight of jealous rage, leading to a double murder in a high-rise apartment. Or Trey Sesler, the Mr. Anime creator, whose online niche was a mask for a chilling obsession with mass murder. And the sheer audacity of the prank vlogger who desperately chased content until the shocking final punchline became a body count. These are not just stories of celebrity gone wrong. This is the dark evolution of the attention economy, where notoriety is actively transformed into infamy-as-capital. They didn't fall from grace. They weaponized their fall, turning scandal and crime itself into a grotesque new form of content. This is the ultimate transgression. We are pulling back the police tape on the digital profiles and revealing the truth. For these creators, the biggest act was their last. Case 1. Ali Abulaban, the JinnKid double murder. We begin in San Diego, California, with a digital celebrity whose perfectly curated life concealed a deadly storm. Our subject is Ali Abulaban, a man who achieved significant fame on TikTok under the pseudonym JinnKid. He cultivated an image defined by charisma and celebrity impressions, most famously channeling Tony Montana from Scarface. By October 2021, Ali had amassed nearly 1 million followers, and this online success was the bedrock of his income and his entire identity. Crucially, his public persona was inextricably linked to his family life. His wife, Anna Abulaban, and their young daughter were frequently featured in his content, crafting a viral image of a devoted husband and a happy, affluent family residing in a luxury apartment overlooking the city. However, behind the high-rise windows and the TikTok filters, the reality was toxic. The Abulaban marriage was defined by extreme jealousy, paranoia, and repeated abuse perpetrated by Ali. Testimony would later reveal that Ali's obsession with control went far beyond typical marital conflict, driven by a possessive rage that intensified as his career depended more and more on maintaining the illusion of a perfect family. In October 2021, Anna made the definitive decision to end the torment. Following several incidents of physical and verbal abuse, she asked Ali for a divorce. She was determined to start a new life and had begun taking steps toward financial independence. This move for Ali was not just the end of a marriage. It was the catastrophic destruction of his entire public brand and his sense of self-worth. To his mind, if he couldn't control Anna, he couldn't control his narrative, and his status would vanish. Ali moved out of their apartment, relocating to a hotel, but his psychological obsession became acutely dangerous. The loss of physical proximity was replaced by a calculated modern form of invasion, setting the stage for the tragedy that would soon unfold. Ali's revenge was fueled by technology. Before leaving the 35th floor apartment, Ali secretly downloaded a spy application onto his daughter's iPad. He configured the app to turn the device into a remote listening post, allowing him to monitor all conversations and sounds inside the home without being present. This action was crucial, demonstrating deliberate, long-term planning, turning the device into an accessory to the eventual crime. For days, Ali drove around San Diego or sat in his hotel, listening to the feed. He listened to Anna moving on with her life, talking to friends, making plans, and, most critically, interacting with others. The digital surveillance amplified his jealousy, turning every mundane sound into proof of his betrayal and fueling his rage. On the morning of October 21st, 2021, Ali was monitoring the audio feed while driving. He heard the sound that confirmed his worst paranoia. His wife, Anna, talking and laughing with another man, Rayburn Barron, 29, a friend she had recently started seeing. The sound of their voices, transmitted directly into Ali's ear via the spy app, served as the immediate trigger for the violence. The digital boundary was crossed, shattering any last illusion of control he held. Ali did not hesitate. He armed himself with a .40 caliber handgun and immediately raced back to the apartment complex. His actions were swift and decisive. He bypassed the elevator and sprinted up the stairs, fueled by adrenaline and rage. Upon entering the apartment, Ali found Anna and Rayburn Barron. He immediately targeted Barron, shooting him 3 times at close range. He then turned the gun on his wife, Anna Abulaban, 28, shooting her once in the head. Both victims died instantly. The presence of the gun and the speed of the execution demonstrated that Ali was fully prepared for a lethal confrontation. The prosecutor would later argue that the premeditation was not spontaneous. It lay in the calculated act of installing the spy app. That act provided Ali with the means to confirm the catalyst for his rage, turning his paranoid fantasy into a factual, violent reality. Following the double murder, Ali Abulaban's actions were defined by a strange, chilling detachment. He did not immediately flee the state. Instead, he drove to the apartment of another acquaintance, confessed the murders, and then drove to his daughter's school. In an unfathomable moment of malice, Ali picked up his 5-year-old daughter, and in the car, calmly told her that he had hurt Mommy. This act was seen by many as a final, cruel manipulation, attempting to inflict lasting psychological damage. He then contacted his mother and confessed the crime to her as well. He was eventually apprehended by police, who had already been alerted to the double homicide. The online celebrity, who had entertained millions, was now sitting in a booking room, charged with capital crime. The ensuing trial in 2024 was defined by the intersection of digital technology and domestic violence. Ali's defense argued that the crime was committed in the heat of passion, claiming he snapped after hearing the conversation through the app. This argument sought to mitigate the crime from first-degree murder to manslaughter. However, the prosecution effectively dismantled this defense. They emphasized that the act of installing the spy app and arming himself before driving to the apartment proved that Ali was deliberately seeking information that would justify a violent reaction. The digital tool was the premeditation. In May 2024, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, finding Ali Abulaban responsible for 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for the commission of multiple murders. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Ali Abulaban serves as a dark testament to the fragile nature of digital fame, proving that the tools used to create and monitor a celebrity persona can easily be twisted into weapons of obsession and domestic terror. The virtual life he desperately tried to control ended violently in the unscripted reality of death. Case 2. Mahek Bukhari, the fatal pursuit of fame. In her early 20s, Mahek Bukhari was an established presence on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. With over 120,000 followers, she commanded a significant platform as a beauty, fashion, and lifestyle creator. Her aesthetic was aspirational, featuring designer clothes, meticulous makeup tutorials, and glimpses into a seemingly successful, comfortable life. This was not just a hobby. It was a burgeoning career and business, generating income through brand partnerships and sponsorship deals. The image of respectability and success was, therefore, not just desirable. It was financially essential. Mahek's mother, Ansreen Khan, was intricately woven into this digital life. Ansreen, in her 40s, often appeared in Mahek's videos, supporting and sharing in her daughter's fame. Ansreen was deeply invested in her daughter's online success, recognizing that Mahek's career elevated their family's social standing and prosperity. The mother and daughter were inseparable, sharing a bond that, tragically, extended far beyond typical familial loyalty. The source of the conflict lay in a secret maintained by Ansreen. For approximately 3 years, Ansreen had been involved in an intense romantic affair with a man named Saqib Hussain, who was just 21 years old and several years younger than Mahek. When Ansreen decided to end the relationship, Saqib refused to let go. The dispute quickly spiraled out of control and became financially and reputationally dangerous. Saqib began demanding a sum of £3,000 he claimed he had spent on Ansreen during their relationship. More critically, Saqib revealed he possessed intimate images and videos of Ansreen. He escalated his demands, threatening to expose the entire affair and leak the compromising material to Ansreen's husband and other family members. He threatened to destroy the family's honor. To Mahek and Ansreen, the threat was devastating. Exposure meant social disgrace within their community, and most importantly, the instant destruction of Mahek's influencer brand. The public image, the foundation of their financial stability and status, would collapse under the weight of the scandal. The need to silence Saqib and retrieve the sensitive material became an overwhelming homicidal motivation, cementing the deadly pact between mother and daughter. They decided that the risk of exposure was a greater threat than the commission of a crime. The plan to silence Saqib was meticulous and cold-blooded, orchestrated primarily by Mahek Bukhari. The evidence presented in court would reveal Mahek played a leading and pivotal role in organizing the operation. Her determination to protect her online reputation drove every step. The scheme was simple: lure Saqib into a confrontation. They arranged a meeting at the Toby Carvery restaurant parking lot in Leicestershire on the evening of February 11, 2022, under the pretense that Ansreen would finally pay him the £3,000 he demanded. Saqib, wary of the arrangement, traveled from Banbury, Oxfordshire, with his friend Mohammed Hashim Ijazuddin, who drove them in his Skoda Fabia. But Mahek and Ansreen did not arrive alone. They recruited several male associates, described as their street army, to intimidate and overpower Saqib. The group included Raiz Jamal, who drove a Seat Leon, and Recon Carwin, driving an Audi TT. This armed and intimidating posse was waiting in the parking lot. When Saqib and Hashim arrived and saw the larger, aggressive group, they instantly realized it was an ambush. Saqib screamed at Hashim to drive away immediately. The victim's car sped out of the parking lot and onto the A46 highway, with the two cars driven by the Bukhari group and their accomplices in immediate, aggressive pursuit. What followed was a terrifying, minutes-long high-speed chase along the dark dual carriageway. The prosecution meticulously tracked the path of the vehicles, proving that the intent was not just to recover the phone, but to force Saqib off the road and stop him by any means necessary. The chase involved dangerous maneuvering, aggressive swerving, and attempts to box in the victim's Skoda. In a desperate final act, Saqib Hussain managed to dial the 999 emergency services from the passenger seat of Hashim Ijazuddin's car. The chilling audio recording became the most critical piece of evidence. The operator could hear Saqib's voice frantic and filled with terror, screaming, "They're trying to ram us off the road. They're literally trying to kill me. I'm going to die." Saqib provided the license plate number of one of the pursuing cars, but before he could offer any more detail, the phone line went silent, punctuated by a horrific, sickening crash. The fatal impact occurred when the Seat Leon, driven by one of the accomplices, deliberately swerved and collided with the Skoda. The victim's car was sent spiraling out of control, careening across the central reservation and slamming violently into a dense tree line. The impact was so severe that the Skoda was instantly ripped apart and engulfed in a massive fire. Both Saqib Hussain and Mohammed Hashim Ijazuddin died instantly in the burning wreckage. The chase had ended in cold-blooded murder. In the hours and days immediately following the double murder, Mahek Bukhari and Ansreen Khan engaged in an elaborate, calculated cover-up. They disposed of their cell phones, attempting to erase the digital evidence of their planning and communication on the night of the crime. They then feigned ignorance and shock, hoping the police would classify the deaths as a tragic, accidental car crash caused by excessive speed. However, the recorded 999 call, the voice of Saqib Hussain screaming his final, desperate words, was undeniable. It provided the victim's identity and the specific threat posed by the individuals in the pursuing vehicle. This audio evidence, combined with CCTV footage and cell tower data tracking Mahek's movements, quickly led investigators to the influencer and her mother. The ensuing trial at Leicester Crown Court lasted 3 months and drew intense national media attention, captivated by the story of a social media star trading her fame for murder. The prosecution meticulously laid out the case, arguing that the crime was a classic example of calculated, cold-blooded murder. They argued that Mahek's extreme fear of losing her celebrity status, and therefore her income and reputation, drove her to eliminate the blackmailer. The motive was not just personal. It was intrinsically tied to her digital career. Mahek attempted to defend herself by claiming she was simply trying to mediate the situation and retrieve her mother's property, minimizing her role in the lethal pursuit. But the jury rejected this narrative. Mahek's frantic phone calls coordinating the chase and the deliberate ramming of the victim's car proved her direct and leading involvement in the deadly violence. In August 2023, the verdict was delivered. Mahek Bukhari and Ansreen Khan, along with a third accomplice, were convicted of 2 counts of murder. The judge, sentencing the mother and daughter, emphasized the chilling nature of their motive. Mahek Bukhari was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 31 years and 8 months. Her mother, Ansreen Khan, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 27 years. Other accomplices received sentences ranging from 13 to 24 years. Case 3. Noah Galle. The deadly pursuit of digital validation. Our third case examines a phenomenon unique to the digital age, a high-speed pursuit of fame that ended in catastrophic mass homicide. This is the story of Noah Galle, a young man who sought validation on social media by broadcasting the very recklessness that would ultimately kill 6 innocent people. Noah Galle, an 18-year-old resident of Wellington, Florida, was active on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. He wasn't famous for comedy or fashion. He was famous for speed. Under his various usernames, Galle cultivated a persona centered entirely on high-risk, high-speed driving and overt displays of disregard for traffic laws. His content often featured videos taken from inside his vehicle, a 2019 BMW M5, showing the speedometer needle buried deep into triple digits, sometimes exceeding 180 miles per hour on busy public highways. For Galle, the thrill of dangerous driving was secondary to the digital reward. Every post, every video capturing a reckless stunt, brought likes, comments, and new followers. This digital applause acted as a powerful, addictive feedback loop, reinforcing his destructive behavior. The likes validated the danger, effectively turning his phone into a co-conspirator and the road into his personal broadcasting studio. The more risk he took, the more attention he received, driving him to push the limits further. His content was not subtle. He documented his car's powerful engine, posted videos of himself weaving violently through traffic, and often captioned his illegal stunts with bravado and challenges. This persona of the invincible speed demon created an audience that cheered on his felonies, making him believe that the rules of the real world did not apply to his online celebrity status. The tragic irony of Galle's digital life was that he meticulously documented the progression of exact criminal behavior that would culminate in the mass deaths of 6 people. His videos were not just entertainment. They were evidence of a pattern of escalating, willful disregard for human life, a behavior entirely fostered and encouraged by the pursuit of digital views. On the night of crime, this dangerous feedback loop was set to conclude in the most devastating way possible, trading online validation for widespread destruction. The night of the crime was January 27, 2022. Noah Galle, continuing his high-speed pursuit of online validation, was driving his 2019 BMW M5 on State Road 7, US 441, in Delray Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida. The posted speed limit on that stretch of road was 55 miles per hour. Galle's speed, according to later accident reconstruction, was estimated to be well over 150 miles per hour at the time of impact. The victims were traveling in a 2018 Nissan Rogue SUV. The SUV contained 6 occupants: Mirlane Julcius, 45, Remise Michelle, 53, Marie M. Rose, 58, Michelle Lewis, 77, Philane Jew, 46, and Van Ice Persina, 29. These were individuals driving home after a long day of work, living ordinary lives, completely unaware that their fate was about to be decided by a teenager seeking likes on social media. The collision occurred at approximately 10:47 p.m. As the Nissan SUV attempted to cross the northbound lanes of State Road 7, Galle's BMW, traveling at extreme speed, slammed into the passenger side of the SUV. The impact was so severe that the force instantly sheared the Nissan in half, scattering debris across the highway for hundreds of feet. The SUV was completely destroyed. The scene of the crash was immediately declared a disaster zone. 6 lives were extinguished instantly. When first responders arrived, they found the wreckage unrecognizable and the scene chaotic. The sheer velocity of the impact demonstrated a catastrophic transfer of energy, leaving no chance of survival for the occupants of the Nissan. Noah Galle, though injured, survived the crash. Investigators quickly processed the scene, noting the extreme distance the vehicles traveled post-impact, which was the first indicator of the impossible speeds involved. This crash was not a simple accident. It was a devastating act of vehicular homicide, the inevitable result of Galle's long-standing, publicized commitment to extreme criminal driving. The investigation did not stop at the crash site. Authorities immediately utilized the digital footprint Galle had created. His TikTok and Instagram accounts, filled with videos showcasing the same BMW M5 being driven recklessly on the very roads he frequented, provided damning evidence of his routine behavior and his willful disregard for the law. The digital persona he had worked so hard to build now served as a comprehensive confession, proving that the speed on the night of January 27th was not an aberration, but his normal, documented modus operandi. The pursuit of online fame had culminated in the mass murder of 6 people, trading digital validation for 6 lives. Noah Galle was arrested shortly after his recovery from the crash. He was charged with 6 counts of vehicular homicide, 1 count for each person he had killed. Given the weight of the evidence, particularly his own documented digital history of high-speed recklessness, the case was considered a clear example of extreme negligence, rising to the level of criminal intent. The legal proceedings were heavily covered by the media, highlighting the modern element of the crime, the direct link between social media performance and real-world consequences. The prosecutor emphasized that Galle's digital life was evidence that he was well aware of the risks he was taking. His thousands of followers validated his speed, but they did not absolve him of the legal responsibility for the devastation he caused. In March 2023, Noah Galle entered a guilty plea to all 6 counts of vehicular homicide. This plea acknowledged his direct responsibility for the deaths of Mirlane Julcius, Remise Michelle, Marie M. Rose, Michelle Lewis, Philane Dew, and Van Ice Persina. During the sentencing phase, the courtroom heard devastating victim impact statements from the surviving family members, children who lost parents, spouses who lost partners. The severity of the loss was overwhelming. The judge ultimately handed down a sentence of 20 years in state prison. The court ordered that the sentences for each of the 6 victims run concurrently, followed by 10 years of probation. The length and severity of the sentence reflected the catastrophic loss of life resulting from the pursuit of online notoriety. The case of Noah Galle is a painful and necessary illustration of the fatal consequences that occur when the lines between digital performance and reality blur completely. His BMW M5, which he used to garner likes and views, became a weapon of mass destruction. The thousands of followers he acquired through his reckless stunts could not save him from the legal and moral accountability for the 6 lives he so carelessly extinguished on a Florida highway. His pursuit of digital validation came at the absolute highest possible cost. Case 4. Cameron Herrin, the viral tragedy of Bayshore Boulevard. Our 4th case takes us to Tampa, Florida, and explores a horrifying nexus of youthful recklessness, privilege, and digital-era celebrity. This is the story of Cameron Herrin, a young man whose life, once defined by promise and family wealth, became tragically synonymous with a deadly street race and a viral social media obsession. The setting was May 23, 2018. The day was meant to be a celebration. Cameron Herrin had just graduated from Tampa Catholic High School, As a graduation gift, he had received a brand new 2018 black Ford Mustang, a car designed for speed and power. Herrin, along with his friend John Barano, driving a Nissan Altima, and his brother Tristan Herrin, a passenger in the Mustang, decided to test the limits of their high-performance vehicles on one of Tampa's most scenic and iconic routes, Bayshore Boulevard. Bayshore Boulevard is a long, winding stretch of road known for its beautiful waterfront views and the pedestrian sidewalk that lines the water. The posted speed limit at the time was 40 miles per hour. What started as a casual drive quickly escalated into an illegal street race. Herrin and Barano, fresh from their high school celebration and fueled by the adrenaline of their powerful new cars, were captured on surveillance video and reported by multiple witnesses as they began speeding and aggressively weaving through traffic. This behavior, whether documented on a phone or just known among friends, was typical of a culture of fast cars and risk-taking common among young drivers. Unbeknownst to them, heading in the same direction on the pedestrian path was Jessica Reisinger-Robinolt, a 24-year-old Ohio resident visiting family, and her 21-month-old daughter, Lilia, whom she was pushing in a stroller. The Mustang, a powerful symbol of Herrin's new adulthood, was about to become an unstoppable weapon. The young men were driven by the thrill of speed, competitive machismo, and the casual indifference to public safety, a mindset that often seeks validation, even if only among their immediate circle, before a tragedy thrusts it onto the global stage. The collision course was set, contrasting the ordinary moments of a mother and child with a reckless digital-era need for speed. The race culminated in unimaginable tragedy. As Jessica and Lilia Robinolt crossed Bayshore Boulevard, Cameron Herrin's Mustang, traveling at a horrific criminal velocity, barreled toward them. The official police investigation and the car's black box data later revealed the chilling truth. In the moments before impact, Herrin's Mustang reached a speed of 102 miles per hour, more than 2.5 times the legal speed limit. Despite a last-second, desperate attempt at hard braking, which saw his speed drop slightly just before contact, Herrin's massive vehicle plowed into Jessica and Lilia. The force of the impact was absolute and immediate. Jessica Reisinger-Robinolt died instantly at the scene. Her daughter, Lilia, was rushed to the hospital with catastrophic injuries, but succumbed to them the following day. The immediate aftermath was chaos and despair. The picturesque Bayshore Boulevard was transformed into a crime scene, permanently scarring the community. Herrin, who was just 18 at the time, and Barano, who was 17, were quickly arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony vehicular homicide and unlawful racing. The legal journey was protracted and created a significant public division. Herrin and Barano initially pleaded not guilty, but both eventually changed their pleas. The 2 cases, however, diverged dramatically in their outcome. John Barano, the driver of the Nissan Altima, accepted a negotiated plea deal with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide and unlawful racing in exchange for a sentence of 6 years in state prison, followed by 15 years of probation. Barano's lighter sentence was due, in part, to the fact that his vehicle was not the one that directly struck the victims, and the plea deal was approved by the Robinolt family. Cameron Herrin, however, chose a different path. He pleaded guilty, but opted for an open plea to the court, placing his entire fate in the hands of the presiding judge, Christopher Nash. This decision allowed the court to hear exhaustive testimony and evidence, including Herrin's own history of documented reckless driving, including a prior incident where he reached 162 miles per hour on a freeway. This evidence, combined with the extreme cruelty of the crime, set the stage for a sentence that stunned the public and created a completely unexpected viral sensation that had nothing to do with justice. During the sentencing hearing in April 2021, the court heard devastating and powerful victim impact statements. David Robinolt, Jessica's husband and Lilia's father, spoke directly to Herrin, stating, "This was a crash, not an accident. Please be aware of that. It is critical for you to understand that you've created everlasting pain and depths of sorrow." Hillsborough Circuit Judge Christopher Nash acknowledged the severity of the act and Herrin's history of speeding. Nash ruled on the open plea, sentencing Cameron Herrin to a total of 24 years in state prison, 9 years for the first count of vehicular homicide and 15 years for the second, to be served consecutively. This sentence was 4 times the length given to his co-defendant, Barano, reflecting Herrin's direct responsibility for the fatal impact. However, the conclusion of the legal case was merely the beginning of the digital phenomenon. Almost immediately after the sentencing, an unprecedented social media campaign erupted, focusing on Cameron Herrin. Across TikTok and Twitter, a massive international following began to insist that the sentence was too harsh and that Herrin was too cute or too innocent to be jailed for such a long period. The hashtag Justice for Cameron Herrin quickly went viral, achieving over 1.7 billion views on TikTok. His official, empty TikTok account amassed over 2 million followers. The campaign was an extreme example of the blurring lines between celebrity, sympathy, and justice, fueled by superficial appeal rather than facts. The bizarre, obsessive digital following included a complex mix of genuine supporters and, according to experts, automated accounts and bots, many originating from overseas. This cult following became so intense that they flooded court systems and corrections facilities with messages, even resulting in prison staff harassment that led to Herrin being placed in solitary confinement at one point. The Herrin family themselves spoke out about the phenomenon, with Cameron's mother calling it an unhealthy obsession. The case of Cameron Herrin ultimately stands as a dual tragedy: the devastating loss of Jessica and Lilia Robinault to inexcusable recklessness, and the subsequent digital perversion of justice, where the cold facts of a high-speed murder were twisted into a viral sympathy campaign based purely on aesthetics and manufactured celebrity. The 24-year sentence, however, remains a definitive statement that the consequences of extreme vehicular homicide are real, regardless of one's profile, online or otherwise. Case 5, Danuel Drayton, the predator in the profile. Our 5th case takes us into the dark reality of online dating and social media luring, revealing how digital platforms can be weaponized by a predator. This is the story of Danuel Drayton, a man who, despite a history of violence, used the illusion of connection on apps like Tinder and Instagram to target and victimize women across multiple states. Drayton, originally from New Haven, Connecticut, presented himself online as a charming, romantic prospect. This carefully constructed digital facade was used to lure unsuspecting victims who were seeking connection and companionship. The very nature of dating apps, which encourage quick trust and rapid progression from digital conversation to real-life meeting, provided Drayton with an efficient and easily accessible hunting ground. However, Drayton's true history was defined by an extensive pattern of violence against women. Records show his criminal history dated back to 2011 in Connecticut, including arrests for strangulation, harassment, and violating protective orders stemming from incidents where he allegedly beat and choked a past girlfriend. This history of abuse, however, was repeatedly overlooked or concealed by system failures in the court process, allowing him to be released onto the public with tragic consequences. In June 2018, Drayton was arrested in New York for allegedly choking an ex-girlfriend and sending her threatening messages, including a threat to cut her car's brake lines. Prosecutors requested a relatively high bail, yet a judge, lacking full knowledge of his violent past due to missing records, released him without bail on July 5, 2018. This judicial misstep provided Drayton with a brief, fatal window of freedom. Unfazed, Drayton immediately returned to the dating apps. Just days after his release, he connected with Samantha Stewart, a 29-year-old nurse from Springfield Gardens, Queens, New York, whom he met on Tinder. She was a beloved professional and a role model, simply looking for a date. Samantha Stewart was duped into going out on a date with the defendant, who played a charmer online, but was in fact an alleged sexual predator, according to the Queens District Attorney. The stage was set for Drayton's deadliest act, facilitated by a dating app and a disastrous judicial error. On July 16, 2018, Samantha Stewart and Danuel Drayton went on their date. They eventually went back to her home on 145th Road in Springfield Gardens. Sometime that day, Drayton's charming digital persona dissolved into horrific violence. Drayton allegedly beat and strangled the 29-year-old nurse in her own home. The severity of the attack was devastating. Reports indicated some of Samantha Stewart's teeth had been knocked out during the assault. In a shocking continuation of the crime, Drayton allegedly engaged in sexual misconduct with her dead body. He then moved Samantha Stewart's lifeless body, wrapping her in a blanket and leaving her on the floor in the corner of her bedroom. The murder was discovered on July 17, 2018 by Samantha Stewart's brother, who immediately called their father, who then contacted police. The scene was gruesome, and the initial police investigation quickly identified Drayton as the prime suspect, particularly as he had used online platforms to arrange the meeting. Drayton's actions immediately after the murder demonstrated a calculated effort to evade justice, facilitated by his victim's possessions. He allegedly stole Samantha Stewart's credit cards and fled the crime scene in a white van, which he abandoned at Kennedy International Airport a day later. Using one of the victim's stolen credit cards, Drayton purchased a one-way plane ticket to California, believing he could escape prosecution by crossing the country. However, New York Police Department detectives, working with the Fugitive Task Force, were able to track Drayton's movements, largely due to the use of the stolen credit card for the plane ticket and cell phone tracking. Their pursuit led them across the continent to North Hollywood, Los Angeles. This pursuit revealed the terrifying scope of Drayton's violence. Just days after allegedly murdering Samantha Stewart, Drayton had already victimized another woman. Police traced him to a hotel room where they found him on July 24, 2018, having allegedly raped and held a 28-year-old woman captive against her will for 2 days. Authorities linked this attack to Drayton's use of a ride-sharing app, where he had met the new victim. The quick intervention of law enforcement potentially saved the California woman's life. The arrest revealed a suspect with a terrifying pattern of behavior. NYPD Chief of Detectives Dermot Shea noted at the time that the common denominator in these two cases, one being a murder, one being a rape, is dating websites. Police sources later stated that following his arrest, Drayton confessed to killing as many as 7 other people in various states, though authorities worked to verify the veracity of these claims. Danuel Drayton was initially held in Los Angeles to face charges related to the kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted murder of the California woman. He later pleaded not guilty to those charges, and during a jailhouse interview, he claimed that voices in his head were responsible for his actions, stating, "I'm a passenger in my own body." He also expressed a desire to get caught, saying he intentionally used the victim's credit cards. However, authorities found no history of mental illness to support his claims. The priority for New York prosecutors was ensuring justice for Samantha Stewart. In March 2022, Danuel Drayton, then 31, was extradited back to New York to face charges related to the 2018 murder. Upon his return, he was indicted by a Queens County grand jury on a comprehensive 18-count indictment. The charges included murder in the second degree, sexual misconduct, grand larceny, and identity theft. Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz, speaking about the brutal nature of the crime and its digital origin, stated, "This was a brutal crime that makes every person using a dating app fearful. The weight of the evidence, including his documented escape and the capture during another violent act, was overwhelming." In October 2022, Danuel Drayton finally pleaded guilty to charges including murder in the second degree and sexual abuse in the first degree for the death of Samantha Stewart. In December 2022, Drayton was sentenced to 25 years to life in state prison. He will also be required to register as a sex offender upon release, although due to the nature of his sentence, release is highly unlikely. The sentencing concluded a 4-year legal battle that brought accountability for the devastating loss of Samantha Stewart's life. The case of Danuel Drayton stands as a chilling symbol of the dangers inherent in the digital dating landscape. He exploited the vulnerability and trust essential to online connection, using the accessibility of dating apps to turn initial dates into deadly ambushes. His story serves as a stark warning about the need for extreme vigilance when meeting individuals whose true nature may be hidden behind a charming digital profile. Case 6. Trey Sesler, the vlogger's familicide and failed rampage. Our sixth case delves into the dark history of early YouTube, chronicling the slow, terrifying descent of a seemingly ordinary content creator into a mass murderer. This is the story of Trey Sesler, known online in the late 2000s and early 2010s as Mr. Anime, whose pursuit of infamy began online and culminated in the calculated killing of his entire immediate family in Waller, Texas. Trey Sesler, born in 1989, launched his YouTube channel, LensCap Productions, on September 14, 2006. In the nascent days of the platform, he found a modest following by creating content that appealed to specific online subcultures. As Mr. Anime, he posted thoughtful, detailed anime series, reviews, and short, often comedic, skits. To his audience, he was a respected voice in the community, a harmless, if intense, enthusiast. However, behind the facade of the critical anime reviewer, Sesler harbored a deep and escalating fascination with violence and mass murder. While his primary channel focused on animation, his online footprint gradually began to reveal darker interests. In some of his videos, Sesler would routinely showcase his weapons, a seemingly tangential hobby that provided a chilling glimpse into his escalating obsession. Investigators would later trace a pattern of increasingly severe criminal behavior, beginning long before the 2012 murders. Law enforcement characterized Sesler as a classic example of a killer who starts small and progresses to the unthinkable. Authorities discovered that Sesler had confessed to a history of escalating violence that began with killing family pets and other animals for practice. This progressed to acts of vandalism and property damage, including shooting near schools in the middle of the night and setting fires. He was building himself up, preparing for something catastrophic. The investigation revealed that Sesler was heavily inspired by infamous mass casualty events, particularly the Columbine High School massacre and the Virginia Tech shooting. Investigators found that Sesler had actively studied the biographies of notorious mass murderers and serial killers, including Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and David Berkowitz, even keeping a research paper on the subject. In the months leading up to the murders, Sesler's online activity became more ominous. He posted a video 1 month prior to the killings, titled, "Mr. Anime is planning something," announcing a 2 or 3 week break. To his followers, it was a content hiatus. In reality, it was the final period of preparation before he executed his long-planned spree of violence. The triple murder occurred on March 20, 2012, at the family home in Waller, Texas. The victims were Trey Sesler's entire immediate family. His mother, Rhonda Y. Sesler, 57. His father, Lawton Ray Sesler Jr., 58, a 5th grade teacher. And his older brother, Mark Allen Sesler, 26. The parents, who had been married for 34 years, were well-regarded members of the community, with Rhonda working at the Waller Times. The sequence of the killings was brutal and calculated. At some point before 1 p.m. that day, the opportunity arose. Rhonda Sesler took Trey to the garage to show him a minor dent in her car. Trey seized this moment to execute his plan. He shot his mother at point-blank range multiple times with a .22 rifle. She was the first to die. His father, Lawton Sesler, is believed to have been asleep inside the home when the first shots were fired. Trey then moved into the house and confronted his brother, Mark. Mark was initially shot, but managed to survive the first round of fire and lock himself in a bathroom. Trey, however, relentlessly pursued his wounded brother, breaking down the door and executing him with a pistol, before delivering a final shot to his head. The noise of the protracted violence finally woke Lawton Sesler. Trey then shot his father twice. The initial shootings were followed by what investigators described as a war zone. Trey, now armed with an AR-15 style rifle, continued moving through the home, firing at his mother and delivering a final shot to his father. He also proceeded to wreck the family home and kill every family pet, a final act of destruction. After the killings, Trey Sesler committed a bizarre act of documentation. He wrote messages on the walls near the bodies. These desperate scribbles read, "I love my mom, dad, and brother. Why did I do this? And God forgive me because I cannot forgive myself." These writings were later interpreted not as true remorse, but as a final, theatrical flourish to complete his horrific performance. Following the murders, Sesler loaded his black 2010 Ford Mustang with a high-point carbine rifle and over 100 rounds of ammunition. He then drove to Waller High School, his former campus. He had confessed to investigators that he had meticulously planned a Columbine-style mass shooting. Sesler drove to the school parking lot and waited, armed and ready, contemplating his next move. However, as students began to exit the building, Sesler reportedly had a sudden change of heart, finding the violence suddenly too real. He backed out of the school shooting portion of his plan, having narrowly averted an even larger catastrophe. The bodies of the Sesler family members were discovered on March 20th, 2012, after concerned relatives called police for a welfare check. The war zone of a crime scene immediately signaled a violent catastrophe. Sesler was arrested later that evening at a friend's house near Magnolia, found with multiple guns in his possession. During an intense 8-hour interrogation by Texas Rangers and the FBI, Trey Sesler confessed to the triple murder. While media reports initially suggested he killed his family to spare them the shame of his planned school shooting, Sesler himself disputed this, telling investigators he killed them simply because they were the first immediate human targets in his sight. His motive was not mercy, but a pathological desire to transition from fantasist to killer, driven by his deep fascination with mass violence and the desire to outdo historical mass murderers. In the aftermath, police confiscated numerous weapons, a stockpile that included at least 6 guns and a massive quantity of ammunition stored at both the family home and his grandmother's residence. His history, from killing pets to documenting weapons online, was deemed a classic example of escalating criminal deviance. On August 2, 2012, Trey Sesler, then 22, pleaded guilty to all 3 counts of capital murder. There was no trial. At sentencing, he took the extraordinary step of asking the judge to take away his right to appeal or parole, stating that he feared he was a danger to himself and those around him. The court honored his plea and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This verdict brought the quickest form of closure possible to the community of Waller. Lawton and Rhonda's co-workers and neighbors spoke tearfully of the family that was shattered by the darkness hidden behind their son's computer screen. The case of Trey Sesler is a chilling landmark in the intersection of digital identity and mass violence. His story proves that the insular community formed around online content, even something as benign as anime reviews, can conceal an active, pathological desire for destructive infamy, a desire that was only fulfilled when he exchanged his computer mouse for a rifle, turning his family home into the final, horrific set piece of a tragic digital narrative. Case 7. Claire Miller. The Command Hallucination and Familial Homicide. Our 7th case focuses on a tragedy that occurred within the confines of a quiet family home, illustrating the lethal disconnect between a teenager's public digital life and her private, untreated psychological deterioration. This is the story of Claire Miller, a teenage TikTok influencer from Manheim Township, Pennsylvania, whose untreated mental illness culminated in the violent death of her own sister. In 2021, Claire Miller was like many of her peers, active on social media. She had amassed a considerable following, accumulating over 22,000 followers on TikTok. Her content was typical of a young influencer. Short, often humorous videos, lip syncs, and snippets of her life. She used her platform to connect, entertain, and project a veneer of normalcy and stability, which was entirely false. Behind the lens, Claire was struggling profoundly. She was dealing with severe depression and an undiagnosed, escalating psychotic disorder. Her parents and immediate family were aware of her struggles, but the true depth of the internal turmoil, the auditory and visual hallucinations, remained largely hidden, masked by the digital distraction of her influencer life. The victim in this case was Claire's older sister, Helen Miller, 19. Helen was beloved by her family and the community, but she lived with severe cerebral palsy. The condition left her wheelchair-bound and entirely dependent on her family for all aspects of her daily care. Helen was vulnerable, trusting, and incapable of defending herself. The presence of a vulnerable, beloved family member would make the sudden, violent act even more incomprehensible to those outside the home. The quiet, domestic world of the Miller family contrasted sharply with the chaotic noise of Claire's internal life. Her severe mental health symptoms were reportedly intensifying in the days and weeks leading up to the tragedy. Claire later told investigators that she was experiencing overwhelming auditory hallucinations, a woman's voice, that were driving her to act, creating an unbearable psychic pain that she desperately sought to silence. The stage was set for the complete breakdown of reality, where the digital world faded entirely and was replaced by a psychotic command. The act of violence occurred in the early morning hours of Monday, February 22, 2021. The family was asleep and the house was quiet. According to the evidence presented in the subsequent legal proceedings, Claire had reached a critical breaking point driven by the psychosis. She later stated that the command hallucination was so intense that she believed the only way to silence the oppressive voice was to carry out its instructions. Sometime shortly after 1 a.m., Claire went to the kitchen and retrieved a large kitchen knife. She then quietly proceeded to the bedroom where her older sister, Helen, lay sleeping. Helen, due to her cerebral palsy, was completely immobile and defenseless. The attack was swift and brutal. Claire stabbed Helen Miller once in the neck. Helen had no opportunity to cry out, defend herself, or even move. She died from the single stab wound, a devastating act of familial homicide carried out against the most vulnerable member of the household. Immediately following the murder, the aftermath was defined by Claire's chilling compliance and detachment. She did not attempt to clean the scene or flee. Instead, covered in her sister's blood, Claire walked outside into the winter cold. At approximately 4:21 a.m., Claire used her phone to dial 911. When the dispatcher answered, Claire calmly and deliberately confessed to the crime. A quiet female voice, slightly distorted, "I stabbed my sister." When police arrived at the Mannheim Township home, they found Claire standing outside. She was cooperative and composed, but the horrific nature of her crime was immediately apparent. Responding officers testified that they saw a young woman who was calm, but whose pants were covered in blood. Claire was reported to have directed the officers inside, telling them precisely what they would find. When asked where her sister was, Claire simply led them to the bedroom. Inside, officers found Helen Miller's body, confirming the devastating reality of the teenage influencer's confession. The police immediately took Claire into custody, where she remained composed while detailing the sequence of events. The immediate digital record of her fame contrasted starkly with the raw, brutal violence she had just committed, leaving local authorities stunned by the severity and coldness of the act. The evidence, her voluntary call and confession, was insurmountable. Due to the severity of the charge, Claire Miller, despite being a juvenile at the time of the crime, was ordered to be tried as an adult in the state of Pennsylvania. This decision brought intense scrutiny to the case, as her defense team, led by attorney Robert Baer, argued fiercely that the crime was a direct consequence of her severe, untreated psychosis, and that she required long-term psychiatric treatment, not simply incarceration. The defense team pushed for the case to be moved to juvenile court, arguing that Miller was not criminally responsible in the conventional sense. However, given the gravity and fatal outcome of the assault against a defenseless victim, the court proceeded with adult charges. The legal debate centered on accountability versus mental state. In June 2023, Claire Miller, then 16 years old, entered a plea of guilty but mentally ill to the charge of third-degree murder. This plea acknowledged her legal guilt in causing her sister's death, while simultaneously recognizing the significant role her diagnosed mental illness played in the commission of the crime. During her sentencing hearing, the court heard devastating testimonies about the life Helen lost and the impact on the surviving family. The prosecution emphasized that while mental illness was a factor, Claire's actions were destructive and required severe punishment. The judge ultimately sentenced Claire Miller to a term of 12.5 to 40 years in state prison. The verdict was specifically structured to ensure that, while serving time for the crime, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections would be required to provide comprehensive, ongoing psychiatric and medical treatment for her serious mental illness. The court acknowledged the incomprehensible tragedy and the clear role of the command hallucinations in driving the violence. The outcome sought to balance justice for Helen Miller with recognition of Claire's severe pathology. The fact remains that a teenage girl whose biggest public identity was her TikTok fame was convicted of murdering her vulnerable sister in a psychotic episode. The case of Claire Miller is a devastating testament to the extreme dangers of severe mental illness hidden behind a digital screen. It demonstrates that fame offers no insulation from internal collapse, and that in the most tragic circumstances, the violence dictated by a psychotic mind can target those closest and most dependent on the perpetrator. Her story now serves not as a teenage influencer's profile, but as a somber legal precedent regarding the intersection of psychosis, familial violence, and social media visibility. Case 8. Ashley Grayson, the 8-figure business coach and the $60,000 hit. Our 8th case exposes the dark underbelly of the online business coaching world, where reputation is currency and digital feuds can quickly escalate into real-world violence. This is the story of Ashley Grayson, a Dallas-based influencer who styled herself as an 8-figure business coach and course creator, and whose relentless pursuit of success and immunity from criticism led to a conviction for a murder-for-hire conspiracy. Ashley Grayson, 35, built her entire brand on aspirational success. Her social media profile, primarily on Instagram, featured designer clothes, luxury vehicles, and claims of instantaneous wealth, such as earning $1 million in just 40 minutes from her online courses teaching others how to monetize their skills. She presented herself as a guru, a philanthropist, and an untouchable authority in the digital economy. This image of overwhelming financial success was her shield and her source of influence. However, the world of online entrepreneurship is ruthlessly competitive, and the business coaching niche is often rife with fierce professional rivalries. In 2021, Grayson developed an intense animosity toward a woman in South Haven, Mississippi, who ran a business similar to her own. The two women had never met in person. Their entire conflict existed exclusively in the digital space. Grayson became convinced that the South Haven woman was actively attempting to damage her reputation by creating fake online profiles to post negative reviews and criticism about her courses and business practices. For an influencer whose entire financial structure was built upon trust and perceived authority, this online critique was seen not just as a business hurdle, but as an existential threat. It threatened to puncture the illusion of her 8-figure status and potentially destroy her income stream. This digital rivalry consumed Ashley Grayson. She became obsessed with silencing this critic, moving far beyond typical online retaliation. She began plotting a solution that would be absolute, decisive, and entirely criminal: murder for hire. Her determination to protect her constructed digital empire led her to believe that the only way to safeguard her reputation was to permanently eliminate those she perceived as threats. The plot began to materialize in August 2022. Ashley Grayson reached out to a woman from Memphis, Tennessee, with whom she had worked in the past. Under the guise of discussing a business opportunity, Grayson invited the Memphis woman and her husband to fly to Dallas for a meeting. The invitation and subsequent travel across state lines would prove crucial, classifying the crime as a federal offense. Use of interstate facility in commission of murder for hire, $18 USC Section 1958. In early September 2022, the couple met with Ashley Grayson and her husband, Joshua Grayson, in Dallas. It was in this meeting that Ashley Grayson laid out her shocking proposal. She offered to pay the couple a total of $60,000 to murder 3 different people. The targets were driven entirely by personal and professional animosity. 1. The South Haven, Mississippi business competitor, the primary target from the online feud. 2. A former boyfriend, a source of personal betrayal. 3. A Texas woman who had recently posted negative comments about Grayson on social media, another digital critic. Grayson placed a value of at least $20,000 on the life of each intended victim. The Memphis couple, rather than accepting the deadly offer, immediately decided to alert law enforcement. They bravely chose to cooperate with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, transforming the plot into an intricate, recorded sting operation. On September 10, 2022, the cooperating Memphis woman video recorded a crucial call with Grayson. In this recording, Grayson confirmed her desire to have the Mississippi woman killed as soon as possible, even offering an extra $5,000 if the murder could be carried out within the following week. This evidence proved Grayson's specific intent and financial commitment to the crime. The agents instructed the Memphis couple to pretend the initial murder attempt on the Mississippi woman had occurred but was unsuccessful. They sent Grayson a picture of police lights from an unrelated incident in Memphis as proof of their attempt. The couple then demanded $10,000, half of the initial payment for that specific target, for their supposed effort. Showing her commitment to the plot, Ashley Grayson and her husband met with the couple in Dallas and handed over the $10,000. This payment, caught by the authorities, sealed the case against her, providing the tangible, financial proof of the murder-for-hire conspiracy. The federal investigation culminated in a grand jury indictment in the Western District of Tennessee in July 2023, charging Ashley Grayson and her husband, Joshua Grayson, with use of interstate facility in commission of murder-for-hire. The trial in March 2024 focused heavily on the recorded evidence and the digital origins of the plot. The prosecution emphasized that the motive was rooted in online feuds and a senseless rivalry that had dangerously bled into the real world. The government argued that Grayson's celebrity status and wealth provided the means, and her obsession with controlling her digital narrative provided the motive. After a week-long trial, the jury delivered a split verdict. Joshua Grayson was acquitted of the charges, but Ashley Grayson was found guilty as charged. Her conviction was a decisive victory for the prosecution, proving that the conspiracy had been initiated and financed by the self-proclaimed business coach. Fortunately, due to the swift action of the cooperating couple and the FBI, no one was physically harmed. However, as the acting U.S. attorney noted, the intended victims and their families still suffered a severe and emotional impact from the knowledge that a wealthy influencer had tried to pay for their execution. On October 31, 2024, United States District Court Judge Thomas L. Parker handed down the sentence. Ashley Grayson was sentenced to 120 months, the maximum available sentence for the federal charge, which amounts to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Critically, as this was a federal conviction, there is no possibility of parole. The case of Ashley Grayson serves as a stark and unique warning about the potential dangers lurking beneath the surface of digital fame. It demonstrates how easily extreme vanity, professional insecurity, and the wealth generated by online success can be channeled into a calculated, lethal criminality. Ashley Grayson, the 8-figure business coach, traded her life of luxury and influence for a decade in a federal penitentiary, having demonstrated that for some influencers, protecting their online reputation is literally worth the price of another person's life. Case 9. Terryon Thomas, the Mr. Prada murder charge. Our 9th case is perhaps the most contemporary, exposing the immediate and shocking fallout when a massive social media following meets severe, brutal crime. This is the story of Terryon Ishmael Thomas, a 20-year-old Louisiana native known to millions as Mr. Prada, whose digital fame was shattered by a charge of murder and obstruction of justice in the death of therapist Dr. William Nicholas Nicky Abraham. In the world of TikTok, Terryon Thomas was a rising star. Operating under the handle Mr. Prada 456, he had amassed a massive following, with approximately 4 million followers. His content was defined by fashion, lifestyle, and highly energetic vlogs, creating a public image of a successful, stylish young man with his finger on the pulse of internet culture. His persona, the Mr. Prada brand, was his livelihood and his gateway to fame. The victim in the case was Dr. William Nicholas Nicky Abraham, 69, a licensed professional counselor, life coach, and former priest who ran a therapy practice in the Baton Rouge area. Dr. Abraham was a well-respected professional whose work focused on mental and spiritual health. The contrast between the two men could not have been greater. the young flamboyant digital influencer consumed with views and fame, and the established, older mental health professional focused on healing and community. Authorities have stated that, as of the initial investigation, the relationship between Thomas and Dr. Abraham was unclear, with no evidence to suggest that Thomas was a client of Abraham. This lack of a clear, established motive added a layer of profound mystery to the violent outcome. The focus of the investigation quickly turned to the last known activities of Dr. Abraham. Surveillance footage placed Dr. Abraham arriving at Terryon Thomas's apartment complex in Baton Rouge on the morning of Saturday, September 28, 2024. He was captured wearing the same clothes he would be found in the following day. This footage established the crucial link between the TikTok celebrity and the soon-to-be deceased therapist, setting the physical location for the subsequent violent events. The fact that the influencer, whose life was broadcast constantly, was the last person seen with the victim, immediately drew a huge digital spotlight onto the hidden, violent reality lurking behind the Mr. Prada profile. What transpired inside Terryon Thomas's apartment after Dr. Abraham's arrival is still being pieced together, but the evidence gathered by the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, EBRSO, paints a picture of extreme, focused violence. The tragedy became public on Sunday, September 29, 2024, when a passerby discovered a body on the side of Highway 51 between Fluker and the village of Tangibo, approximately an hour east of Baton Rouge. The body was found wrapped in a blue-colored tarp and hidden on the side of the road. The victim was identified as Dr. Nikki Abraham. The Tangipahoa Parish Coroner's Office quickly ruled the death a homicide, citing the cause of death as blunt force trauma. Sheriff Gerald Sticker described the attack as very violent and physical, noting significant bruising to the head, shoulder, and neck of the victim. This physical evidence proved that a vicious altercation had taken place. Investigators immediately turned their attention back to Thomas's apartment in East Baton Rouge Parish. A search warrant was executed, and the findings were damning. While Dr. Abraham's own home showed no signs of struggle, Thomas's apartment contained evidence that indicated a violent physical fight had occurred. Detectives reported finding a significant amount of blood inside the residence, which was later confirmed to match Dr. Abraham's DNA. Furthermore, investigators located multiple sharp objects and other weapons within the apartment, strongly suggesting the scene of the murder was Thomas's own home. The prosecution theorized that Dr. Abraham was killed on Saturday evening. The subsequent efforts by Thomas to dispose of the body were witnessed and documented. Arrest warrants detailed that nearby witnesses observed Thomas dragging an object wrapped in a blue-colored tarp down the stairs of his apartment complex hours after Dr. Abraham was last seen alive. Witnesses noted Thomas appeared to be struggling to move the heavy bundled object, which was then loaded into what they claimed was Dr. Abraham's own vehicle. This evidence, the blood matching the victim's DNA, the weapons, the eyewitness accounts, and the final chilling image of the body wrapped and dumped nearly 60 miles away, form a powerful circumstantial case that pointed directly at the TikTok celebrity. Thomas had successfully managed his digital image for millions, but his attempts to manage the physical evidence of a violent homicide were amateur and ultimately futile. As authorities closed in, Terryon Thomas was already on the run. On September 30th, 2024, police in Dallas, Texas, hundreds of miles from the crime scene, spotted and attempted to pull over a vehicle that was later confirmed to belong to the deceased Dr. Abraham. The driver, identified as Terryon Thomas, fled from the traffic stop. The pursuit ended when Thomas crashed the vehicle into a parking lot. Thomas was taken into custody in Dallas, initially booked on local Texas charges, including unauthorized use of a vehicle, Dr. Abraham's car, aggravated criminal damage to property, and resisting arrest. The arrest in the victim's car across state lines provided crucial confirmation of the investigation's focus. Louisiana authorities quickly moved to formally charge Thomas. On October 3, 2024, the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office officially charged Terryon Thomas with second-degree murder and obstruction of justice in connection with the death of Dr. Abraham. Though the user provided first degree, public records indicate the initial formal charge was second-degree murder. Thomas was eventually extradited back to Louisiana to face prosecution in Baton Rouge. The investigation continues, with a primary remaining mystery being the motive. With Thomas not listed as a client, the reason for Dr. Abraham's visit to the influencer's apartment and the sudden, extreme violence that followed remains under active investigation. Possible theories range from a robbery gone wrong to a personal dispute or a mental health crisis. But until Thomas's legal team clarifies his defense or further evidence is released, the true catalyst for the killing is unknown. The case of Terryon Mr. Prada Thomas stands as a final, immediate example of the ultimate deceit of digital celebrity. A young man who built an empire of style and fun on TikTok now faces life in prison, his carefully constructed persona completely obliterated by the grim reality of a murder charge, a blood-soaked apartment, and a victim's body dumped on the roadside. The millions of followers he once commanded can offer no defense against the hard evidence of criminal homicide. Case 10, Courtney Clenney. The influencer, the toxic relationship, and the stabbing. Our 10th case is a volatile blend of digital celebrity, extreme wealth, and domestic violence, unfolding in the hyper-glamorous, high-rise environment of Miami, Florida. This is the story of Courtney Clenney, a social media influencer and successful OnlyFans model known as Courtney Taylor, whose toxic relationship with her boyfriend, Christian Tobia Bumsley, culminated in his stabbing death in April 2022. Courtney Clenney built a massive following, at one point exceeding 2 million followers, on Instagram and OnlyFans, generating significant income from her adult and lifestyle content. Her life was a projection of luxury, fitness, and beauty, contrasting sharply with the destructive chaos that reigned behind the closed doors of the couple's apartment in the exclusive One Parasocial condominium building in Miami's Edgewater neighborhood. The relationship between Clenney, 26, and Christian Bumsley, 27, began in late 2020 and was described by prosecutors and neighbors alike as extremely combative and tempestuous. The violence was mutual but highly documented, a horrifying illustration of a modern, volatile relationship where accusations of abuse flew from both sides. Neighbors frequently reported hearing loud, intense arguments and disturbances stemming from their apartment, and police had been called to their residence multiple times for domestic incidents. Evidence later released by the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office painted a terrifying picture of the relationship's dynamic. This included secret recordings made by Bumsley, and most damningly, surveillance video from an elevator in their building showing Clenney initiating a physical attack on Bumsley months before the fatal incident. Bumsley's own text messages revealed he feared for his safety, with one message reading, "Is love going to kill me?" He documented being slapped, spat on, and even stabbed in prior altercations, though his family later noted Clenney was financially supporting Bumsley during a financially vulnerable period for him. The constant cycle of fighting, reconciliation, and violence accelerated throughout their 4 months of living in the Miami apartment, culminating in a final confrontation on April 3, 2022, the day that saw the toxic digital star transition into a defendant charged with murder. The events of April 3, 2022, were the climax of their destructive cycle. The two had been arguing intensely throughout the day. At some point, the verbal fight turned physical inside their condominium. Courtney Clenney called 911 to report that Bumsley had been stabbed. When Miami police arrived, they found Christian Bumsley suffering from a single catastrophic stab wound to the chest. He was rushed to the hospital, but was pronounced dead shortly after. Bumsley was unarmed at the time of the stabbing. Clenney, covered in blood, was initially detained and questioned by investigators. She immediately claimed self-defense. Her account to police was specific. She alleged that Bumsley had pushed her and thrown her to the floor, prompting her to grab a kitchen knife. Clenney claimed that she threw the knife at Bumsley from a distance of approximately 10 feet, while he was standing near the sliding glass doors, and the knife struck him. However, the medical evidence gathered from the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's office quickly contradicted this narrative. The medical examiner determined that the single stab wound was 3 inches deep, entering Bumsley's shoulder area and puncturing vital structures in a downward trajectory. The autopsy concluded that the fatal injury was inconsistent with a knife thrown from a distance. Rather, it was consistent with a knife being driven or plunged at close range. The medical examiner ruled Christian Abumsali's death a homicide. Following the stabbing, Clenney was not immediately arrested. Police initially considered the death an act of self-defense, a decision that drew immediate and intense criticism from Abumsali's family and the public. Clenney subsequently checked into a rehabilitation facility in Hawaii for substance abuse and post-traumatic stress disorder, having left the state shortly after the incident. The investigation, however, continued to focus on the overwhelming digital evidence contradicting the self-defense claim. The accumulation of Abumsali's private videos and text messages, which showed Clenney as the frequent aggressor, provided the basis for the prosecution's case that the stabbing was not a spontaneous act of defense, but the final, violent act in a long pattern of abuse perpetrated by the influencer. Clenney's own digital record of her aggressive behavior was a key factor in the eventual criminal charges, proving that the high glamour life had a violent, unscripted reality. 4 months after the stabbing, in August 2022, the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office obtained an arrest warrant. Courtney Clenney was arrested by the U.S. Marshal Service in Hawaii and extradited back to Miami. She was formally charged with second-degree murder with a deadly weapon. She entered a plea of not guilty and has been held without bond since her extradition. The legal battle has become highly publicized and controversial. The prosecution, led by State Attorney Catherine Fernandez-Rundle, has maintained that the evidence, particularly the medical examiner's findings and the prior history of documented aggression from Clenney, proves she was the aggressor who intentionally killed Christian Abumsali. They used the digital record to argue that Clenney was abusive, manipulative, and violent throughout the relationship. Clenney's defense team, however, has mounted a vigorous self-defense strategy. Her lawyers maintain that Clenney was the victim of domestic abuse by Abumsali, and that on the night of the incident, she was genuinely attempting to save her life. They have presented counter-evidence, including a controversial demonstration by a knife-throwing expert using a pig carcass, designed to show that a thrown knife could cause the fatal wound, attempting to validate her initial, disputed claim. The case has also seen extraordinary legal maneuvers, including the arrest of Clenney's parents on charges of unauthorized access of a computer, stemming from allegations that they tried to access Abumsali's laptop after his death to tamper with evidence. While those specific hacking charges against all three were later dismissed, they underscore the extreme, high-stakes nature of the legal fight over the digital evidence in the case. As of the current date, Courtney Clenney remains incarcerated without bond in Miami-Dade County, awaiting trial. The trial date continues to be set and rescheduled, leaving both families in legal limbo. The case of Courtney Clenney is a definitive symbol of modern tragedy, where the pursuit of digital fame was tragically intertwined with a private life characterized by destructive volatility. It will be the court's task to determine whether Christian Abumsali's death was a murder carried out by the aggressor, or a terrible act of self-preservation by an abused woman, a critical and harrowing distinction that will define the legacy of the OnlyFans model known as Courtney Taylor. The dark side of the attention economy. Over the course of this investigation, we have documented 9 distinct cases where the pursuit of digital validation, the pressures of influencer fame, or the convenience of online tools directly intersected with the commission of murder and mass homicide. We have seen figures like Abulaban, who weaponized surveillance technology, Noah Galle and Cameron Herrin, whose speed was fueled by the addictive rush of digital approval, Ashley Grayson and Mahek Bukhari, who plotted murder simply to preserve their carefully constructed online reputations, and Danuel Drayton, who used dating apps as a hunting ground. The terrifying commonality across these 9 stories is not simply the tragedy of murder, but the complete collapse of the boundary between the digital persona and the criminal reality. Before we delve deeper into the sociological patterns of these crimes, take a moment to engage with this content. If these stories have educated or shocked you, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Your support ensures we can continue to analyze these critical intersections between crime and technology.